thinking, okay, is this pouring into my kid, or is this just withdrawing from my kid? Mm-hmm. And so you need to look for signs of like, okay, my kid enjoys coming. Like I don't have too much trouble getting them out of bed to come to church. Mm-hmm. I was just speaking at a kids ministry conference last week, leading a breakout, and my topic was how to tell Bible stories to kids. I can talk all day about just how fun that is to see kids like get God's word. As a dad, I want my kids to love their faith. I want them to love God's word. I want them to love Jesus.
Welcome to the Hard Questions with Bad Christians podcast. My name's Michael. I'm your host. We start every episode the same way by reminding you that I am not a pastor, I am not a preacher, I am not the smartest man, and I am not a teacher, but I am a Christian with a sketchy past, and I have some questions, so let's dive in. Now, I am so excited for today's episode, and I believe this will be one of the easiest and most impactful episodes that we will have, just purely based, number one, on the topic that we'll be discussing, and number two, who we get to discuss that topic with. Now, the topic of today's episode, I'm literally in the thick, waist deep right now as we speak, and that is how to lead our children to Christ. So today we're going to talk about, number one, how to feel comfortable bringing your kids to church. Number two, how to make sure that your kids have a great relationship with God. Number three, how to read the Bible to your children and discuss those hard stories, those hard topics. And most importantly, how to make sure that when your kids grow up, they not only have a firm foundation in faith, but they don't hate going to church. Now, my guest today, we are absolutely, it's a pleasure to have with us. I couldn't think of anybody better to discuss this topic with. My guest today has been in ministry, specifically children's ministry, for over 20 years. He's a speaker that speaks to thousands of children pastors and gives them resources and ideas of how they can help to lead the children in their church to Christ. He's a published author. He's came out with a number of books. Most recently, a 52-week devotional called Let's Walk, which I'm doing with my family, with my children right now, and they absolutely love it. But that is not the only reason that I'm excited for today's episode. I have 4 kids myself, and to my 2 oldest boys who have been going to church with us since they were little, I told them we were having the podcast today, and I told them who our guest was going to be, but I took it a step further, and I showed them a picture. Both of my kids' faces lit up. They said, "We know him. He teaches us about Jesus." And they were so excited. And as a parent, as a father that strives to make sure that my kids have a relationship with Christ, it just puts so much happiness and joy in my heart to know that they are being led by a Bible-believing church and by a children's pastor who truly exhibits the fruits of the Spirit and the love for Christ. So my pleasure to introduce our guest today from Bayside Church, children's pastor, ladies and gentlemen, James Hamilton. James, welcome to the podcast.
Wow. Well, thank you, Michael. That's a lot of pressure now. You set me up. What a build-up. Thank you. It's such a privilege to be part of this. I know we've been in conversations right from the start of this podcast when you just came to me with this idea. And so to be sitting here, to see you in action and to be part of it, what a privilege. Thanks for letting me be here.
100%. James, thank you so much for being here. And I will tell the audience, me and James are friends. We actually met at a Bayside event that I was volunteering at. And kind of funny, I don't typically like to be in the middle of everything. I'm really good at being a supervisor, really good at being a coordinator. But I've learned when I volunteer, my job is just to step back and put myself where I need to be the most helpful. So that day, I was kind of trying to find a quiet place to sit at. James happened to be sitting there too. I sat down with him, had no clue what your role was at Bayside. I did know you were a part of the staff and a pastor, and we had a great conversation. Turned to find out you're the one that's helping to lead my children to Christ, which I absolutely appreciate. And when God gave me the idea for the podcast, the very first person that I reached out to was James, and he asked me some very pivotal questions about what I want to get out of the podcast, how we were going to do it. And I remember he said, "I want to be your biggest cheerleader through this," which you have been. You brought us one of our guests, Jeremy Brownlee. Shout out, Jeremy. me. He was a fantastic guest.
Oh, yeah.
So you have been all over this podcast without anybody knowing it, and I'm so excited that we can have you here as a guest.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Awesome. I'm excited.
Let's do it.
Let's see where this goes.
Let's jump in.
Yeah.
So first question we always ask, where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up? When'd you become a Christian?
Well, you can tell from my accent, I'm not from California. No, I was born in Scotland, actually. I'm a Scotsman, just outside Glasgow. But when I was 7, we moved down to England. My dad's a pastor, and he got called down to a church just outside London, about 30 miles east of London on the coast. So a little seaside town called Southend-on-Sea, which is like the equivalent of like Santa Cruz. Kind of like a little bit cheesy, bit, like not always the best place for a teenager to grow up, with all the kind of seaside attractions and stuff like that. But so I grew up in England, and followed a career in theatre. Actually, going to school, I never really was that academic. Didn't really. Funny, I'm an author now, but like I wasn't really into any particular academics. But I loved performing, and I loved acting, and drama was the subject I just loved. I remember at the end of my, so it was year 11. So I guess that's be like once you finish high school, you get like an end of report. And in the report, one of my teachers had said, James still hasn't quite figured out what school's all about yet, as I was about to leave. So, but theatre was my thing. Studied that at college. After college, I went and joined a touring theatre company, which then I started a children's touring theatre company. This was a Christian company. We traveled all over the UK, Europe. We came to the US, doing theatrical productions mostly based on Christian stories. So stories like The Hiding Place, Cross and the Switchblade. You might not know what they are, but they're really pretty famous Christian stories, like autobiographical stories. And so I loved performing and being on stage and touring. And then eventually I met a girl, my wife, Callie, and realized I couldn't be married and live out of a suitcase. They didn't go well together. And so I started a position at a church as I had to help lead their kids ministry. And, growing up as a PK, a pastor's kid, I always said I'm never going to be a pastor. Like I saw underneath the hood of what leading a church is. And I always said, I'll follow any career, but I don't want to be a pastor. But so often God has other ideas. His sense of humor, he's like, I kind of fell into being a kid's pastor. And that's the path that God, put me on. So was leading a kids ministry at a fairly big church in the UK, as well as doing a lot of training and using like theatre and storytelling. And then out of the blue, one day got a phone call from a church in Kansas City, Missouri.
Wow. Literally
just out of the blue. So apparently I'd had my resume was on a staffing website, which I'd forgotten about. I think I'd used it because I wanted to create a resume. I didn't have a resume and wanted to find a template for one. And so it was on this website randomly. So my eldest son was just about 2 at the time. And I remember this phone call, and I looked at my phone and it was a US number. And I was like, who's calling me? I think that's a US number. So picked it up, and it was, hey, this is Pastor Rick Friesen from Abundant Life Baptist Church in Lee Summit, Missouri. We're looking for a kids pastor, and we saw your resume, thought you might be interested. You like my accent. That's pretty close.
Loved it. Nailed it. Yeah, the theater background.
And so, I was like, this has got to be a wind-up. Like, I said, Missouri, that's America, right? Okay. Let's talk. Let's see how that goes. So I remember when my wife came home from work, and I was like, you'll never believe the conversation I just had. Some church in Missouri, America, are interested in. They found my resume. They're interested in getting us over there. And, so very long story short, we had some Skype interviews. I came out. They offered me the position. I said, no, I need Callie to come and visit first. This is a life change, right?
Smart man.
Yeah. So you can't make a decision like that without, it was a life-changing decision for us. So Callie came out. We just fell in love with the people there. Weren't sure what we were letting ourselves in for, honestly. But we just felt that God was opening that door for us, and we just kept, walking through it. And we just kept saying, Lord, if this is not right, close that door. Otherwise, we'll just keep following you. Well, we thought God did close the door because our visa got denied. We had applied for a religious worker visa, and because we attended a church that was in a denomination that wasn't in the US, just through a little technicality like that, they said no. So it's like, okay, well, that was interesting. But the church said, look, we'd like you to come and speak at our kids' camp. So I was like, yeah, okay, we can come and do the kids' camp, and then that's probably the reason why, why we went through all this process. So they picked me up from the airport and said, we're going straight to the immigration attorney's office. We've got another plan to get you here.
Wow.
So wait, what? So again, long story short, that we found a different route through a different kind of visa, which then was successful. And so on February 13th, 2013, we stepped on a plane and began our new life in the US. And so I was a kids pastor there at that church for 6.5 years. And then God called us to go even further west to Bayside here in Sacramento area. And so we've been here for about 6.5 years.
Wow.
So it's been a wild journey for sure.
Been an interesting trip.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. When you and your wife, when you got that call from that church in Missouri and you had to approach your wife about that, and as things got more serious, can you explain to us kind of how that felt for you and your wife?
Yeah.
I assume that was a lot of praying involved with that and making sure that God's hand was in this. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. Obviously, there was initial kind of shock and excitement and intrigue. And it wasn't, when I say it was completely out of the blue, actually, it really wasn't, because, we had been praying about what was next. I was working part-time for the church, part-time doing ministry stuff, and we just kind of felt like we were always chasing our tail, like just, we were unsettled. And we'd been to the US. I'd been to the US with the theater company a couple of times. Callie and I had come to a conference at Willow Creek Church in Chicago, and we just loved the US, and we just loved the scale of everything. And being in ministry and kids ministry, there's nothing at the scale in the UK that you can do things here at the US.
Really? Wow.
As far as size of churches or just like resources available and just this. And so there was always in the back of our minds, like, wouldn't it be cool to like go to the US and do ministry there? But never really, thinking that would ever be something that would be credible. And so isn't it funny how like God just like hears and plants those dreams in your mind, in your heart? And sometimes like he does that for a reason. He plants those seeds, he gives you those experiences, he puts that on your heart, and then suddenly opens that door for you. And you just got to be ready. It's like, wow, God did open that door. God did give us that opportunity. And we didn't even have to try that hard. It just happened. So, but then, reality for us began to set in. It's like, well, okay, we got to tell our parents that we're literally uprooting, we're leaving this continent. And so, we had an almost 2-year-old son at the time. And so for us, the adventure was more exciting than daunting, but the hardest part was leaving all of our extended family and everything we pretty much knew here in the UK. But the biggest hang up I had was, okay, I have this 2-year-old son this decision, we've had, over 30 years of life and experience here in the UK. This is really changing the trajectory of his life. Mm-hmm. This is a bigger decision for him than it even is for us. And so I was just very emotional and tearful about that. And then I remember just one night, the Lord brought me right to the story of Abraham and how the Lord spoke to Abraham, and he called him to out of where he was and to go to a completely different place. The same story as ours. Like, I'm calling you and I'm uprooting you. And he said, I am going and I am preparing the land for you and your descendants. And so the Lord kind of just basically said, like, I've already prepared that place for your descendants. So basic translation is, I've already got this. And I've got Elijah's, your son's, life planned out over there. I've gone before that. And so that for us was like, okay, that's full confirmation. It's like, that's how God just uses his word to really confirm things.
Yeah.
So it was a hard move. Like, it was very emotional, and honestly, like the first 2 weeks that we were in Missouri, we were staying in somebody's house. There was a snowstorm, was a foot of snow, and we were kind of looking out the window like, what have we done here? Second week we're there, it snows again. So there's like literally 2 foot of snow. We're like, what is this place? Like, what have we done?
A lot different than Santa Cruz weather.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was definitely a cultural shock moving from, outside London to Midwest. Mm-hmm. But the people there, Abundant Life, just incredible. So, and we're lifelong friends with many people there in Missouri. We've been back a couple of times now, and so God. I always say, like, your home is where God puts you. Mm. And so, I can say I'm from the UK, or I'm from Scotland, or I'm from Missouri, or I'm from Roseville. Like, my home is exactly where God has placed you. And I think that's always something I like to go back to, is like, well, I'm just where he needs me.
Mm-hmm. Where he needs me today.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Now, let me ask you this. Were you a children's pastor before you had a kid?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, kind of. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Callie and I were married for 6 years before we had kids. I like to say we enjoyed our life for a while.
No chaos for a while.
No, I can't even remember what that was like now.
Yeah, me too.
So I was kind of full-time kids pastor at a church, and then I went part-time. And when I was part-time, I was, doing a lot of using storytelling and drama in schools. Mm-hmm. I was doing some training. I was lecturing at a Bible college, and so that's around that time is when we had Elijah. So, so I know why you're asking that question, because when you lead a kids ministry, it's one thing. When you have a kid in that kids ministry, it's another thing. And so I've really always tried to look leading a kids program, look through the eyes of, like, what's this like for my kid? Mm-hmm. Is my kid safe? Is my kid having fun? Is my kid growing in his faith? My boys are now 14 and 11. They've pretty much like gone through the whole kids ministry. And so being a parent has really been formational in helping me to lead a ministry in a church, because selfishly, like, I want my kids to love church.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I get to have a say in that.
Yeah.
I don't just get to send them and hope for the best.
Yeah. And it's so interesting as I kind of learned your story today and previously when we've chatted. And now I listen to what my kids do in church, and there's a lot of acting. There's a lot of storytelling and things like that. So I love the way that God prepared you in your younger years for what you're doing 100%. Today and how to work with children the correct way so they truly understand. So, man, that is a blessing.
Yeah, that's I was just speaking at a kids ministry conference last week, leading a breakout, and my topic was how to tell Bible stories to kids. Mm. So this is probably the one thing, other than Jesus and my family, I'm most passionate about. Mm-hmm. It is, how do you help kids fall in love with God's word? Mm-hmm. How do you help kids realize that this isn't just another book? that the Bible is living, it's alive, and can speak to their lives. And so for me, being able to use the gifts that God gave me in like theater and storytelling and creativity, to marry that with like, how do you take the words out of these pages of the Bible and bring them to life for kids? So it's like, this is unbelievably amazing and fun and exciting and challenging and dramatic and emotional. Like knowing not just like the overall picture and story of God, but the individual stories and characters in the Bible. Like I can talk all day about just how fun that is to see kids like get God's word and apply it to their lives.
But let's talk about that.